You're listening to Middle East expert and keynote speaker Neil Lazarus, live from Jerusalem.
Hi, so we are back with another podcast. It's been a while, but it's always fun. And now we've got Ben M Friedman joining us today. Now, if you don't know who Ben M Friedman is, I don't think you're involved in anything to do with the fight on anti-Semitism. He is the man, he is the legend of fighting anti-Semitism, new generation, or like whatever you like to call it. He's written books, like, oh my God, like, tell us a bit more. Ben, first of all, explain why my phone always bings whenever I do a podcast. And second, I forget to turn it off. Let's start with the M. Why is Ben M Friedman and not Ben Friedman like everybody else?
So firstly, my middle name is Maxwell, so it's real. It really stands for a real letter. Then there's just a lot of Ben Friedmans who are Jewish. And then there is one non-Jewish Ben Friedman who was an actor from Emmerdale who I believe has been charged with rape. So I'm trying to distance myself. You know, my work is about fighting for the Jewish community, so I would like to be not connected to him.
Okay, that's a pretty good reason. All right.
Yeah.
So, you've started a movement or a call for Jewish pride. What do you mean?
So Jewish pride is a standalone movement for the Jewish community. There are some people who kind of only associate the idea of pride with the LGBTQ plus community. And while certainly my work in building this movement was inspired by my experience pursuing gay pride, this is about a standalone movement for Jews that teaches us to be proud of our Jewishness, to reject the shame that is imposed on us, and most importantly, to define our own identities as Jews and not utilize the non-Jewish kind of perceptions of who we are or our experience.
It's a very diaspora movement. In other words,
you would say that, actually. So listen, I totally thought that at the beginning. So I wrote my first book in October. I started writing in October 2019.
Which is called?
Jewish Pride, Rebuilding a People. That's book number one.
You've got to be able to plug a product on a podcast.
Yeah, you're right. That's a schoolboy error. But I thought what you just said, actually. I thought, okay, this is a movement for a specific type of diaspora Jew. But, you know, that first book came out in Jewish Pride, Rebuilding a People, came out in February 2021. And the response from people who are kind of out with what I perceived my target audience to be has been really extraordinary. Orthodox Jews that I didn't necessarily think needed the power of Jewish pride. Israeli Jews who I didn't think needed the power of Jewish pride. They have benefited from this because while, yes, it might speak specifically in certain ways to our experience in the diaspora, particularly as maybe modern Orthodox or Reform or secular Jews, it actually speaks to everyone because every Jew can benefit from the power of pride, number one. We can all benefit from the idea that we're doing the work internally to kind of see where we might feel shame. And that also applies to Orthodox Jews. So in my second book, Reclaiming Our Story, The Pursuit of Jewish Pride, that is a deep dive into internalized anti-Jewishness. And in both books, I feature interviews with Jewish people from across the Jewish world. And in both books, I feature interviews with Orthodox Jews. So in the second book, there is a woman who identifies as an Orthodox Jew. We would call her Frum. And she talked about internalizing anti-Jewishness, even though her whole life was defined by Judaism and Jewishness. And then similarly, Israelis have also said that they've benefited from the power of pride because it's taught them to understand their identity more, to engage more actively in Jewish traditions, even if they're secular, and to reject the wider world's perception of Israel. Because even if you live in Israel, it doesn't necessarily mean you're immune to that. Israel, you know, we talk about Israel as being the place where Jews are the majority. And of course that's true. But if you zoom out, Israel is one Jewish country among a sea of non-Jewish countries in the world.
What Judaism? In other words, there's an argument about what Judaism is. Is it generally a pride of being like a Reform Jew, or a pride of being a conservative Jew? Are you pushing the pride or are you pushing the Judaism? Because if you push the Judaism, you're going to get into arguments.
No, so I'm pushing pride. And the way I talk about, firstly, I would describe Judaism and Jewishness as a civilization. And I think we have to start properly understanding the definitions of our identity. Like the idea that we're just a religion, that is false. It's never been the case, and it was really imposed on us. And there are many Jews all over the world who are rejecting that. But in terms of, you say what Judaism, I see the Jewish civilization as a buffet table, and on it are goodies and treats from all over the Jewish world. And every Jew has to get up off their seats at this huge simcha we're at and go and choose something from this table. And, you might choose something different to me, but you're still making an active choice and you're still drawing from the well of what is Jewish tradition and culture. So while I'm secular, I don't go to shul, I would, number one, support a Jewish person's right to identify through the religious means, but also me kind of engaging as a more through the idea of a civilization or an ethnicity or an indigenous people is just as legitimate. So it's about offering diversity and saying, we're not a monolith. We've never been a monolith. Even back in the day, we had the Pharisees and the Essenes, right, and the Zealots. We were always the people who argued and who disagreed, and that's totally appropriate. But what we're doing is pride in our Jewishness as a whole. So we're understanding what it means to be a Jew, i.e. where we come from, what our story is, the religious element, but also what I call the secular archaeological element, and then giving people the freedom to express whatever Jewishness they feel most fits their lives. Like, I will talk about my own Jewish practice. I don't eat pork or shellfish, which is a fairly recent addition. I wear a kippah when I'm not wearing a baseball cap and I've done my hair. I wear a Magen David. My partner isn't Jewish. I eat cheese and I eat meat together. I go out on Shabbat. I don't necessarily keep Shabbat. So I'm doing some things which fit with my life, but I'm not doing everything. And that's the way we've always been. And some people might refer to that as picking and choosing, but that's kind of the way it's always been. We're allowed to draw from this huge well and choose what fits our lives and fits our personalities and our belief systems.
Isn't it an excuse to have Judaism light?
No, because it's not necessarily about. I don't think practice indicates Jewish light or not, and I think this is the problem in our community that we
would disagree with you.
Yeah, and I think that's a problem. We have hierarchied Jewish practice, and we have made some Jewish streams the epitome of kind of Jewish, or the top of the hierarchy of Jewish function. I think that each of the Jewish communities needs to promote Jewish values, promote Zionism, promote a connection with Israel, of course. But no, I don't think it's Jewish light. I am the founder of the modern Jewish Pride movement. So I don't think anyone can accuse me of being Jewish light. I have devoted my life to working for this community. I have contributed and used my skills and my talent for this community. And I'm going to practice my Jewishness in a way which fits me. And I do want to share with people that you can be who you are and still be an active, proud Jew. And I think that is partly where I've had some successes, because
isn't that an oxymoron? I'm a proud Jew who eats cheeseburgers.
No, not at all. Because again, we're not a monolith, and we've never been a monolith. And it is a severe misunderstanding of our identity and our history to presume that we are a monolith. Even if you're looking at the ancient kingdom of Judah or the later kingdom of Judea, there were Jews who actively disagreed with one another. There were Jews who disagreed with how to express their Jewishness. So, for example, if we're talking about the mikvah, the Essenes, I believe, they bathed with a cloth on, where the other Jewish groups bathed naked. There has always been a disagreement in how to do this, and that's the way it is. And we should be very wary of anyone who tries to frame us as a monolith. We're not, and we never have been. We have always been a collection of tribes, as it were, and we are Am Echad. We are one people. We are all indigenous to the land of Israel, but we have always been able to exist in that oneness while also understanding that there's different perspectives.
Neil Lazarus Awesome Seminars are educating, motivating, and challenging. Why not book a seminar today via his website, awesomeseminars.com.
What happens if your plurality threatens the monolithic nature of Orthodox Judaism? For example, women should be equal in Judaism, according to many people, yet women at the wall aren't.
No, for sure. Listen, and my work is not about kind of solving every Jewish issue. Like, I recognize that there are conflicts, and I will say, I said in Jewish Pride Rebuilding a People that I don't have all the answers. I would not presume to be so bold to have all the answers and how to deal with this intercommunal conflict. But I think that pride is an empowerment. It's a belief in oneself. It's about defining one's own identity. It's about understanding that we've done nothing to deserve the treatment that we have experienced. So it's It's about giving space to diversity and engaging in conflict. It's about existing in conflict. We know that there's things that we disagree on. And I, again, would never presume to have all the answers. But we have to also understand that we are one people of about 15.2 million. So while we are going to recognize our conflict, engage in them perhaps, we're also going to, at least from my perspective, foster a sense of unity. And of course, there's Jews who disagree with me on that. And that's their prerogative. You can't win everyone over.
Why the urgency? Why now?
Because we're facing a crisis, and I think that we're facing a crisis of Jew hatred, and the world today is not like the world 10, 15 years ago. Now, we know that Jew hatred has always been there, but it has returned to the center. It's become overt once again, and that has kind of elicited a crisis of Jewish identity. So we're ripe for a Jewish pride movement to help us deal with that conflict or that crisis.
Hold on, but what you're saying is you're having a pride movement which is inspired by hatred.
No, it's not inspired by hatred, but of course it's a reaction. If we look at the LGBTQ plus community, the first pride moment, the Stonewall riots were riots against the raiding of a gay club by the police. It is a response, and we're not going to shy away from that. We are responding to the way that we are treated. We're responding to our position in the world, and we're saying, no, we're not going to protect them.
The logic to your argument would be, if you managed to defeat anti-Semitism, you wouldn't have to be proud. You wouldn't have pride.
Yeah, maybe that's true. I also don't think
that's really worrying. Isn't there surely much more to Judaism than a reaction to anti-Semitism and people?
No, I think it would change. I think our relationship with it would change. We would be able to focus on ourselves and internal discussions without having to position ourselves against something. That's just the reality. We're not going to be naive here. We're not going to say that the world that we live in as Jews is not partly impacted by the way we are treated by the outside world. For example, I wear a kippah. And the reason I wear a kippah is because I want to move through the world as a Jew. Historically, we have been marked as Jews to humiliate us or to segregate us. I want to show the world, no, I'm here and I'm proud. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. We have to live in reality. There is Jew hatred and we have to defend ourselves against it and we have to turn it inwards. And yes, pride is internal, it's not external, but we're not going to pretend that it's not inspired by what has transpired in the world, just as LGBTQ plus pride was, just as Black pride was. That's what happens.
What happens if life's good? I mean, I've been to Stanmore, I've been to Islington, I've been to Finchley. Many of the Jews aren't suffering. Life's pretty good. Good. So then there's no need for having a Jew pride because, hey, I think that's London bubble.
I think that's naive. I think it's naive to think about these bubbles. And there are definitely communities who have thought about these bubbles before, and it's not worked out for them. You may feel safe in your specific bubble of your life, and that's really wonderful. But we are part of Am Echad, part of one people, and there are Jews all over the world who don't feel safe. So even if you might feel comfortable, as I do for the most part, walking down the street with a kippah, doesn't mean that pride's not important. We are part of a collective, and a Jew being beaten in the streets of Brooklyn is my problem, even if I live in Islington.
What happens if no one hates you?
Then we have different conversations. Then the movement.
So why are you proud to be Jewish? Because people hate you?
No, not at all. And I think you're mischaracterizing this. And I think that you're kind of it's a little gotcha. Listen, I think that
I have a problem with I love your work. You're a great person. You're a leader in the community. And despite the picture on your wall, I can see it. You can't see it on the podcast. It's not a gotcha moment. I'm trying to I get what you're saying, but if the basis of
it's not the basis
is reactionary,
it's not the basis. It's a reality. We are responding to the way we are treated, and we're choosing to turn inwards and to build a pride movement. That can exist at the same time. It's yes, I will be very frank and very clear, as I have always been, that my LGBTQ plus pride journey was a result of the homophobia that I experienced. I had to go on a journey. And I think that, I said earlier, maybe you don't have pride if no one hates you. I think you do have pride. I think it just changes. We are in a certain position. It is the case that we are experiencing a resurgence in Jew hatred. And in my lifetime, it is unprecedented, and that has inspired us to consider our identities, consider how we fit into these societies in which we live. And then my response, my argument, the movement I'm building is to say, no, we reject that. We turn inwards. We say, we don't care what you think about us. We don't care whether you see us as this, that, or the next thing. We're going to define our own identity. We're going to reject the shame that you impose on us. We're not going to diminish ourselves. We're going to stand up and be proud. And if there's no Jew hatred, listen, I mean, it's a hypothetical because that's never going to happen.
I've been to West Palm Beach. The Jews of West Palm Beach are not suffering. So
I think that we have to understand suffering in nuance. The Jews in North America absolutely have had to diminish their identities to be accepted. They've had to accept, I would argue, humiliations in order to have a semblance of acceptance in American society. That's not acceptance. Let's move away from the idea that one has to be experiencing, God forbid, something like Kristallnacht to be experiencing Jew hatred or to be living in a time where Jew hatred is prominent. Every Jew right now, I would maybe not every Jew, I would say, most Jews are aware of the rise and are worried about it. Even in North America, where things where things have for a long time been, better inverted commas. So we have to understand that the idea that we are afraid perhaps to tell people that we're Jewish, that we have changed our names, changed our noses, that we have diminished ourselves. That's not acceptance. And yes, listen, of course, there are Jews who feel totally free and accepted, and that's wonderful. But we're also part of Am Echad. And if Jews in Israel are being threatened, or if Jews in Brooklyn are being threatened, or if Jews in London are being threatened, that is the problem of every Jew. That is part of pride, understanding that while we're not a monolith, we are a community, we are a people, a nation.
I can only agree with you on that. On the issue of anti-Semitism, and really you rose to fame in the British community, particularly with the rise of Corbyn. What's the situation now with the British Labour Party?
It's complicated. I think Keir Starmer, the new leader, the leader who took over from Jeremy Corbyn, he has done a fair amount and he's acted swiftly with regards to the Parliamentary Labour Party. Jeremy Corbyn was expelled. Diane Abbott had the whip removed after her comments, I believe it was The Observer, saying that Jews don't experience racism, or the prejudice that Jews experience is somehow less than that experienced by the Black community. So that has been progress. But there's also still issues in the councils. So I think that it's a mixed bag. I think that
Corbyn running for the head of the London Council.
I'm not entirely sure. I don't know, to be honest. I think he's running. I know that he's going to be running as an independent, right. But I don't know how that relates.
Under the Labour Party to be running under independent.
Yeah. So listen, there are still issues, and I think what Corbyn did, I was very wary, when Corbyn lost in 2019 and then he left in March 2020, there were Jews who immediately rejoined the party. And I thought maybe they should wait a minute, because the thing that Corbyn unleashed, Corbyn was both a cause and a symptom. And he caused this thing, right? And he unleashed it, but he also was a symptom of these ideologies which exist and have, maybe since he was there, mainstream.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he was a symbol of anti-Semitism, which is inherent in the left, on the far left, as far as it's concerned. What do you think? Because it's interesting. I would argue what happened in the Labour Party in Britain is perhaps 5 to 10 years before what could happen in the Democratic Party post-Biden. What lessons could American Jews learn from the British community?
Firstly, I absolutely agree with you. I think that we're seeing the Corbynization of elements of the Democratic Party. I think that what the American Jewish community should do, and I've got to say, most of my work is in America. I'd say that 90% of the work I do is in North America. I think that, and this is a challenge, maybe what I'm saying is totally unrealistic, but I think there has to be a kind of coming together. What was so remarkable in the UK was that you had Reform, Orthodox, liberal rabbis signing letters as one, right? For the most part, the community stood with one voice. That is easier, of course, in a community of 300,000 people versus 7 million. But I think that what we need to see is the legacy organizations switching onto this. And we've seen that in varying degrees. The ADL have kind of started speaking about left-wing Jew hatred, whereas for a long time they didn't seem to be able to identify it or get it or whatever the case may be. But now they're really kind of regularly speaking on it, which is great. And I think that the community needs to understand the threat. I described Corbyn as an existential threat to British Jewish life. 100,000 British Jews said they would leave the country if he was elected. And I think that the American Jewish community should learn that lesson and should understand that there is a threat to the American Jewish way of life. And yes, they may live in Palm Beach, you said, or, LA or New York or places where there's lots of Jewish people, right? And I understand that certainly gives a sense of confidence because there's strength in numbers. But I would encourage them to zoom out and understand that they're a tiny minority in America as a whole, and come together and recognize the problem and put aside the differences. And this is the crazy thing. You see organizations that won't work with this group or that group, or organizations who still will deny one type of Jew hatred over another, or organizations who will not do the work of Jewish pride. Like, Jewish pride is the most important work that can be done right now, not just because it gives us a sense of empowerment, but because it teaches us that we deserve better, and it empowers us to fight back. So it is, of course, a way for us to be involved in the fight against Jew hatred. And there are certainly organizations in America that are doing that. But I'd say...
Can you be specific? Be specific. Give me 3 pillars of
Jewish pride. So I'd say the Jewish pride is the head, the heart, and the hands. The head is education, is knowledge. We have to know our story. We know that young Jewish college students are going to campuses all over the world, but specifically in North America, and are being radicalized. They're believing the lies that are told about Israel and the Jewish people, and they're turning against Israel, which is a fundamental part of Jewish identity. So we have to know our own story. So that would mean education. Then what we have to do is inspire feeling. And this is not something that can happen overnight. It's not something, that can happen, by accident. We have to inspire the feeling of Jewish identity, of being connected to one another, that feeling of Am Echad. And again, that would be a multi-pronged approach, right? I don't have like one thing that would inspire the feeling. But all I will say is, I flew to Israel a couple of weeks ago, hadn't been for a really long time, and I cried when I touched down because I felt like I was coming home. And not every Jew needs to feel that way about Israel, for sure. But we should be feeling connected to our people. We should know the facts, and we should feel connected to what that means for our identity. And then the last part would be encouraging Jewish action. Exactly what I said about the buffet table, allowing people to choose from the myriad of kind of cultural things that we have to offer to be actively Jewish. And I think that is... listen, all we can do is try.
What would you say to someone, you said in your last sentence, is you were in Israel, you visited, you feel like you were coming home.
Yeah.
Neil Lazarus Awesome Seminars are educating, motivating, and challenging. Why not book a seminar today via his website, Awesomeseminars.com. What
would you say to someone who would argue that Jewish pride is providing a safety boat for diaspora Jewry, that it's something I can get onto, but at the end of the day, if you're living on the Titanic, either don't rock the boat or leave?
Yeah, listen, I think in the diaspora there's the constant conversation of, is it safe, when do we leave, right? That's a constant conversation we have.
Is that still there? Is that present today?
Yeah, I think it is there. And I guess it depends on who you're speaking to. I think I know Jews that are having that conversation. So I think if one elects to stay in the diaspora, you should do so with your eyes open, and you should understand the terms of engagement. And I think you can be a proud Jew and still live in the diaspora. I am. But I also think that we have to understand that diasporic Jewish communities have always been there. There were Jews who elected not to return from Babylon. There were Jews in Alexandria, Jews in Elephantine. So diaspora is kind of a part of our tradition, and we don't all have to live in the same space. And yes, it's wonderful that we have Israel, and I feel that Israel is my home. For a variety of reasons, I'm choosing to make my life in Britain right now. And I think that you can still be a proud Jew and do that. And again, I think that Jewish pride can still relate to Israelis, and they can still benefit from that power.
It's been great talking to you. Thank you. So what's the book? What are the name of your 2 books we have to read? Because I'm going out to buy it right now.
Please. The first book is Jewish Pride, Rebuilding a People, and it is kind of the manifesto of the modern Jewish Pride movement. It's really the case for Jewish pride. The second book, which came out in October of last year, is Reclaiming Our Story, The Pursuit of Jewish Pride. And that book is a deep dive into internalized anti-Jewishness. So it's kind of more commonly referred to as self-hate, but I reject that verbiage, and I'm kind of identifying this phenomenon in our community and offering solutions to guard against it. And unfortunately, it's one of the first books in a century on this topic. There have been articles written in academic work, but we are generations behind other communities in dealing with the impact of Jew hatred on our communities. And that ultimately is what my work is trying to do, what Jewish Pride is trying to do, is kind of help Jews understand the impact of Jew hatred on our feelings as Jews.
So before we started recording, you said you were a student of mine when you were 18.
Yes, long time ago, yeah.
I have to say, it's always fun meeting people after a long time now, and also learning from them. So thank you very much for joining. I learned a lot. I think our listeners learned a lot. And
thank you. Thank you for having me.
We're going to do this again.
I'd love to.
Bye.
If you like this, why not invite Neil Lazarus to speak at your synagogue, church, or school? Check out his website, Awesomeseminars.com.